Amara, Amara.
She froze, her heart pounding. Turning around slowly, she saw no one, yet the voice grew louder and more insistent. Against her better judgment, she stepped closer, drawn in by a strange force. The bark of the tree seemed to ripple as if it were alive. Amara screamed, but before she could free herself, the tree's trunk opened, revealing a hollow, dark as a bottomless pit. Far away, in a crumbling hut at the edge of the forest, a 90-year-old witch named Olumma stirred her cauldron with gnarled fingers. Her eyes glowed a deep green as she muttered incantations. With every soul the whispering tree consumed, Olumma grew stronger, her wrinkles smoothing out and her hunched back straightening. Finally, after what felt like days, he reached a glimmering pool at the heart of the forest. In its center stood a figure cloaked in white, their face obscured by a veil of mist. "I am the keeper," the figure said, their voice echoing like the rustling of leaves. In the heart of a small, quiet village called Umudara, there stood a massive tree with dark, twisted branches that reached toward the sky like the claws of a beast. Its roots dug deep into the earth, spreading out like veins, gripping the land in a relentless hold. The villagers called it Nkuma Akanuche, the whispering tree, because at night, a low hum of whispers could be heard emanating from its bark. No one knew who planted the tree or why it had grown so large, but it was said to have been there for over 70 years. Its thick, gnarled trunk bore strange carvings that no one dared touch, and no birds nested in its branches. The elders told stories of people who had gone missing near the tree, but no one believed them. Until one fateful night. One evening, a young woman named Amara decided to take a shortcut home through the grove where the whispering tree stood. It was late, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. As she passed by the tree, she heard a faint whisper calling her name.
Amara, Amara.
She froze, her heart pounding. Turning around slowly, she saw no one, yet the voice grew louder and more insistent. Against her better judgment, she stepped closer, drawn in by a strange force. The bark of the tree seemed to ripple as if it were alive. Suddenly, one of the roots shot up from the ground and wrapped around her ankle. Amara screamed, but before she could free herself, the tree's trunk opened, revealing a hollow, dark as a bottomless pit. With a terrifying force, she was pulled inside, her cries muffled as the tree sealed itself shut. By morning, Amara was gone, and only a few broken twigs lay at the base of the tree. Far away, in a crumbling hut at the edge of the forest, a 90-year-old witch named Olumma stirred her cauldron with gnarled fingers. Her eyes glowed a deep green as she muttered incantations. With every soul the whispering tree consumed, Olumma grew stronger, her wrinkles smoothing out and her hunched back straightening. Decades earlier, Olumma had planted the tree as a dark pact with the spirits of the forest. For every life the tree devoured, she would gain a year of vitality. But the cost was steep. The tree demanded blood, and she had long since ceased to care who paid the price. "I will live forever," she whispered to herself, her voice cold and sharp like a blade. "As long as the fools of Umudada remain ignorant." The disappearance of Amara sent shockwaves through the village. Her family searched the grove and found her scarf near the base of the tree. One elder, Papa Eze, shook his head gravely. "I warned you all," he said, his voice trembling with fear. "That tree is cursed. It's been here too long, and too many have vanished around it." The villagers dismissed his warning as the ramblings of an old man, but fear began to creep into their hearts. That night, the whispers around the tree grew louder, reaching into the homes of the villagers, calling them one by one. A farmer claimed he heard his late wife's voice in the wind, beckoning him toward the grove. Another villager swore she saw eyes glowing in the tree's bark. Determined to solve the mystery, a young hunter named Chike decided to confront the tree. Armed with his machete, he ventured into the grove under the cover of darkness. The air grew colder as he approached, and the whispers became deafening. "Who are you?" Chike demanded, gripping his weapon tightly. "What have you done to Amara?" The tree's branches shook violently as though mocking him. Then, without warning, a root lashed out, knocking the machete from his hands. Chike stumbled back, but he refused to run. Instead, he grabbed a torch from his bag and thrust it toward the tree. The tree let out a horrifying screech, a sound so chilling it felt as though the air itself froze. The bark began to writhe, and for a moment, Chike thought he saw faces, the faces of the missing villagers pressed against the surface, their mouths open in silent screams. Panicked, Chike dropped the torch and fled back to the village, his cries of terror waking everyone. The next morning, Chike recounted what he had seen to the village elders. Papa Ace nodded grimly. "It is as I feared," he said. "That tree is no ordinary tree. It was planted by Olumma, the witch who was banished from this village long ago. She swore revenge, and now she's feeding on us through that cursed tree." The villagers were divided. Some wanted to burn the tree down, while others feared it would unleash an even greater evil. Meanwhile, Olumma watched from the shadows, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "You think fire will stop it?" she whispered to herself. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." That night, the whispers became unbearable, echoing through the village like a storm. Families huddled together, too afraid to sleep. But one child, a boy named Ifeanyi, had been left alone when his parents went to the elders' meeting. Drawn by the sound of his mother's voice calling his name, he wandered into the grove. What he found was more horrifying than anything the villagers could imagine. The tree had opened again, and inside its hollow trunk he saw the trapped souls of the missing villagers, their faces twisted in agony. At the center stood Olumma, her rejuvenated form glowing with unnatural energy. She turned to Ifeanyi and smiled. "Ah, a new offering," she said, reaching out a clawed hand. Before Olumma could grab Ifeanyi, a loud chant erupted from the village. The elders, led by Papa Eze, had gathered with sacred tools and charms. They began a ritual to break the tree's curse, but Olumma wasn't about to let her immortality slip away. The ground shook, the tree roared, and chaos erupted in the grove as Olumma unleashed her dark powers. Would the villagers be able to destroy the tree and defeat the witch, or would they fall victim to her wrath? The elders chanted louder, their voices trembling but resolute. Papa Eze held a sacred staff adorned with cowries and feathers, pointing it toward the whispering tree. "Spirits of our ancestors," he cried, "we call upon you to break this curse. Free our people from this evil." The air crackled with energy as the villagers formed a protective circle around the grove, holding torches and charms. Olumma stepped out from the hollow trunk, her once frail body now youthful and menacing. Her green eyes glowed like flames, and her voice was a chilling whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You dare challenge me?" Olumma hissed, spreading her arms. The tree responded, its branches twisting and stretching like serpents. "This tree is my life. Your petty rituals cannot undo what I have created." With a wave of her hand, she commanded the roots to attack. They surged from the ground like vipers, grabbing at the villagers. One man screamed as a root coiled around his leg, dragging him toward the tree. Chike, the hunter, leapt forward with a torch and severed the root with a single swing. The tree howled in fury. "Keep chanting," Chike shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't stop, no matter what happens." As the battle raged, Ifeanyi crouched behind a rock, clutching a small amulet his grandmother had given him. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, but he remembered her words. "This charm holds the power of the river spirits. Use it wisely." Suddenly, he had an idea. Crawling through the chaos, he reached Papa Eze and tugged on his robe. "Grandpa, the amulet, can it stop the witch?" Papa Eze glanced at the charm, and his face lit up with hope. "Yes, child, but it must touch her heart. Only then can her bond with the tree be broken." "But how?" Ifeanyi asked, his voice trembling. "She's too strong." The elder's eyes softened. "Courage, my son. You must be swift. We will distract her." While the villagers fought off the tree's attacks, Papa Eze gathered the elders and whispered the plan. They split up, surrounding Olumma to draw her attention. "You cannot win, Olumma," Papa Eze shouted. "The spirits of Umudara will not allow this evil to continue." Olumma laughed, her voice echoing like thunder. "Fools, your spirits are weak. I am eternal." As she unleashed a wave of dark energy, Ifeanyi crept closer, clutching the amulet tightly. The tree's branches thrashed wildly, but the boy was small and quick, darting between roots and rocks. When he was only a few steps away, Olumma turned and spotted him. "You," she snarled. "You think you can defy me, little one?" The ground beneath Ifeanyi cracked open, and a massive root shot toward him. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its grasp. Summoning every ounce of courage, he charged at Olumma and leapt forward, pressing the amulet to her chest. A blinding light erupted from the amulet, illuminating the grove. Olumma screamed, her body writhing as the charm burned her. The whispering tree shook violently, its branches snapping and roots retreating into the ground. Faces of the trapped villagers appeared on the trunk, their expressions softening as they were released from their torment. "No!" Olumma shrieked, her youthful appearance fading. "I will not be defeated." The light grew brighter, and with a final, ear-splitting cry, Olumma and the tree were engulfed in flames. The cursed bark crumbled to ash, and the witch disintegrated into dust, carried away by the wind. When the light faded, the grove was silent. The villagers stared in awe at the spot where the whispering tree had stood. The air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. Slowly, the spirits of the missing villagers appeared, their faces serene. "Thank you," they whispered, before fading into the night sky. Ifeanyi stood trembling, the amulet still clutched in his hand. Papa Eze knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You were brave, my son. The spirits will remember your courage." The villagers returned to Umudara, their hearts heavy with grief for those they had lost, but filled with hope for the future. They vowed never to forget the lesson of the whispering tree, that evil can grow unnoticed if left unchecked. Years later, as the villagers rebuilt their lives, a rumor spread that a strange sapling had appeared in the forest. Its bark was dark, its roots unnaturally twisted. No one dared approach it, for they feared Olumma's curse might return. And late at night, when the wind blew through the forest, some claimed to hear a faint whisper, "I will rise again." The sapling stood at the edge of the forest, small and unassuming, but the villagers of Umudara avoided it like the plague. They whispered about its origins, certain it was the remnant of Olumma's curse. Over time, strange things began happening again. Livestock went missing, and children woke up crying, claiming to hear voices calling their names in the night. Ifeanyi, now older and hailed as a village hero, couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the fight wasn't over. Every night, he dreamed of Olumma's glowing green eyes and the haunting whispers of the trapped souls. Determined to uncover the truth, he visited Papa Eze one evening. "Grandpa," Ifeanyi said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "The sapling, it feels wrong. What if Olumma is trying to return?" Papa Eze sighed heavily, his old eyes clouded with worry. "I fear you are right, my child. Evil like hers is not easily destroyed. The amulet you used weakened her, but her spirit may still linger." "What can we do?" Ifeanyi asked. The elder leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We must act quickly. There is a forbidden ritual that can destroy the sapling before it grows into something more dangerous. But it is risky. If we fail, her power could spread, and the curse will be stronger than ever." Ifeanyi nodded without hesitation. "Tell me what I need to do." Papa Ez gathered the remaining elders that night, and they prepared for the dangerous ritual. They needed rare herbs, sacred ash, and the blood of a brave warrior willing to sacrifice for the village. Ifeanyi volunteered without hesitation, despite the elders' protests. "You've already done enough for us," one elder said. "We cannot ask you to risk your life again." "This is my village," Ifeanyi replied firmly. "I will not stand by while Olumma's evil grows." As midnight approached, the elders led a small group to the edge of the forest where the sapling stood. The moon hung low, casting an eerie silver light on the twisted tree. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the faint sound of whispers coming from the sapling. They formed a circle around it, sprinkling the sacred ash on the ground. Papa Ez began the chant, his deep voice resonating through the night. "Spirits of the land, hear our plea. Bind the evil that seeks to rise. Let it wither, let it perish, let it be no more." As the chant grew louder, the sapling began to tremble. Its tiny branches stretched unnaturally, clawing at the air. The whispers became screams, and a dark mist poured out from the tree, swirling around the villagers like a living thing. The mist coalesced into a familiar form. Olumma. Her once youthful appearance was gone, replaced by a ghastly figure with hollow eyes and decayed flesh. She laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down everyone's spine. "Did you think you could destroy me so easily?" she snarled. "I am bound to this land, to its blood and its roots. I will never be defeated." The sapling's roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around the elders and pulling them toward its base. Ifeanyi fought against the pull, gripping his amulet tightly. "Finish the chant," he shouted, but the elders were struggling to breathe under the crushing grip of the roots. Realizing there was no time, Ifeanyi did the unthinkable. He slashed his palm with a knife and pressed his bleeding hand against the sapling. The blood hissed as it touched the bark, and a blinding light erupted from the tree. Olumma screamed, her form flickering like a dying flame. "No, you will not take this from me." The sapling's roots writhed violently, but the sacred ash and blood of the warrior created a barrier, trapping her spirit within the tree. With a final, deafening roar, the sapling burst into flames, reducing it to ash. The light faded, and silence fell over the forest. The villagers helped the elders to their feet, their faces pale with exhaustion. Papa Eze approached Ifeanyi, who was kneeling in the ashes of the sapling. "You've done it," the elder said softly. "The curse is broken." But Ifeanyi didn't look relieved. He stared at the spot where the sapling had been, his expression grim. "She's gone for now," he said, but her words, she said she's bound to this land. Papa Eze nodded solemnly. "Her spirit may try to return, but we will be ready. You have shown us the strength we need to fight her." The villagers returned home, but a lingering unease remained. Though the sapling was gone, the forest felt different, quieter, darker, and full of secrets. And late at night, when the wind whispered through the trees, Ifeanyi swore he could still hear her voice, faint but defiant. "I will rise again." Months passed, and life in Umudara seemed to return to normal. Crops grew bountiful, livestock thrived, and the villagers felt a cautious sense of peace. Yet Ifeanyi remained vigilant. The memory of Olumma's final words haunted him. Despite his efforts to reassure his people, he could not ignore the quiet whispers that still carried on the night breeze. Whispers that only he could hear. One evening, while walking near the edge of the forest, Ifeanyi noticed something peculiar. The earth where the sapling had been burned was no longer barren. Tiny green shoots had begun to sprout in its place, their leaves unnaturally dark and glistening under the moonlight. His heart sank. "This isn't over," he muttered, gripping the amulet that hung around his neck. That night, Ifeanyi dreamed of a vast, twisted tree, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. At its base stood Olumma, her hollow eyes fixed on him. "You cannot stop what is bound by blood," she hissed. "The roots are deep, boy. You've only delayed the inevitable." Ifeanyi woke in a cold sweat, his chest heaving. He rushed to Papa Eze's hut and recounted the dream. The elder listened intently, his face growing darker with every word. "We need answers," Papa Eze said finally. "There is only one who might know how to stop her for good." Ifeanyi frowned. "Who?" "The keeper of the sacred grove," Papa Eze replied. "A spirit older than Olumma herself, hidden deep within the Forbidden Forest." The Forbidden Forest was a place of fear and legend, a dense, shadowy expanse that no villager dared to enter. It was said that those who ventured too far never returned. Yet, Ifeanyi knew there was no other choice. With Papa Eze's blessing, he prepared for the journey, arming himself with charms, a machete, and the amulet. Several villagers offered to accompany him, but Ifeanyi refused. "This is my burden," he said. "I will face it alone." As he stepped into the forest, the air grew colder, and the light of the sun seemed to vanish behind the thick canopy. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their gnarled trunks etched with strange markings. The whispers grew louder, echoing around him. "Turn back," they murmured. "She waits for you." The forest tested Ifeanyi at every turn. Twisting paths led him in circles, and shadows moved just beyond his vision. At one point, he encountered a clearing filled with strange flowers that released a sweet, intoxicating scent. He felt his mind slipping, but the amulet around his neck grew warm, snapping him out of the trance. As he pushed deeper, he faced visions of his worst fears. His family being swallowed by the earth, the villagers blaming him for bringing more evil upon them, and Olumma laughing as the forest consumed him. Each time, he gripped the amulet and whispered a prayer, grounding himself in reality. Finally, after what felt like days, he reached a glimmering pool at the heart of the forest. In its center stood a figure cloaked in white, their face obscured by a veil of mist. "I am the keeper," the figure said, their voice echoing like the rustling of leaves. "Why have you come, mortal?" Ifeanyi knelt at the edge of the pool. "I seek to destroy the spirit of Olumma, once and for all. She threatens my village, my people." The keeper was silent for a moment, then gestured toward the pool. "Look." The water rippled, revealing a vision of Olumma's past. She was once a young woman, wronged by her own people, cast out and left to fend for herself in the wilderness. In her despair, she made a pact with a dark entity, trading her soul for power and vengeance. The tree she planted was not just a curse, it was a piece of the entity itself, rooted in the land and feeding on the living. To destroy Olumma, the keeper said, you must sever her connection to the land. But be warned, this will not be easy. The dark entity she serves will not release her willingly. How do I sever the connection? Ifeanyi asked. The keeper extended a hand, and a glowing dagger materialized in their palm. This blade is forged from the essence of light and truth. Pierce the heart of the tree with it. But beware, Olumma will do everything in her power to stop you. Ifeanyi took the dagger, feeling its warmth radiate through him. Thank you, he said. I won't fail. Returning to the village, Ifeanyi found the forest edge transformed. The tiny shoots had grown into a small grove of dark trees, their roots spreading rapidly toward Umudara. Villagers gathered in fear, watching as shadows danced among the branches. She's coming, Papa Eza said grimly. We must act now. Ifeanyi stepped forward, the glowing dagger in one hand and his amulet in the other. I'll end this, he said, no matter what it takes. As he approached the grove, the ground trembled, and Olumma's voice boomed from the trees. You cannot destroy me, boy. You are but a fleeting spark against an eternal flame. The trees twisted together, forming a massive, grotesque figure with Olumma's face at its center. Her laughter echoed as roots lashed out, trying to ensnare Ifeanyi. He dodged and rolled, using the amulet to shield himself from her dark energy. Finally, he reached the largest tree at the center of the grove. Its bark pulsed like a heartbeat, and faces of the consumed villagers appeared in its surface, pleading silently for release. Summoning all his strength, Ifeanyi drove the dagger into the tree's heart. The grove erupted in light, brighter than the sun. Olumma's scream shattered the night, her form disintegrating into ash. The dark trees withered, their roots retracting into the ground. The faces in the bark faded, replaced by peaceful smiles as the trapped souls were finally freed. Ifeanyi collapsed, the dagger falling from his hand. When he opened his eyes, the grove was gone, replaced by a lush field of wildflowers. The villagers cheered, rushing to his side. You did it, Papa Eza said, tears streaming down his face. The curse is broken. Ifeanyi smiled weakly. She's gone, for good this time. The village of Umudara flourished in the years that followed, free from the shadow of Olumma's curse. Ifeanyi became a legend, his courage inspiring generations to come. But he never forgot the lessons he learned, that darkness can grow unnoticed, and that true strength lies in facing it with unwavering resolve. And deep in the forbidden forest, the keeper watched over the land, ensuring that no other evil would take root in its soil again.